Thank you very much. Two things before we start. One, I never know if this is the graveyard shift or not, or if you're feeling very sated and happy you've just had lunch. So we'll see how we go. Obviously, those at the back, I'm assuming you're going to nod off a little bit. Those closer to the front, maybe a bit more engaged. Secondly, today, I'm mainly going to be talking about our research that we did earlier this year with Reba. Hopefully you've seen this on various stands or maybe downloaded it as part of your subscription to the Reward and Benefits Association. And sadly, just as I think it was Stephen Dawkins, in fact, said, when he wrote A Brief History of Time, for every equation that he knew had put into that book, he would lose half of his readership. So sadly, this is full of statistics today. You don't need to be able to read the screens from there. I'm going to talk us through them. But ultimately, please bear with me. There's some very encouraging and useful stuff to cover off. So when we were back in, I think, with Debbie and the team, maybe December time, we started thinking about what we wanted our research to be for the year. And then COVID was still very much something at the forefront of the headlines. Nothing like a war, sadly, to take it off of the forefront of the headlines, which obviously politically is doing wonders for certain people. But we had then Brexit. We've had so many things that fundamentally impacted us as businesses and employees recently. That a backdrop, it felt like a bit of a perfect storm, sadly. There's been so much change happening, so many external pressures on us all. They're in a position that if you're there responsible for your benefit and well-being programs, that ultimately it feels like there's more pressure on you than ever to get with the program, to get it right and invest that money wisely. And why is that? Well, as per some of the sessions we've held today, talent shortages have been one of the biggest things that we've seen. We're all competing for talent more than ever before. And most importantly, as I'm going to be talking about today, I think more than ever, our definition of talent has changed as well. And that's led very heavily into the research and some of the things I'm going to share with you. Not only that, competitive pressures, not just inside our traditional industries and sectors, but actually right the way across the economy, as more and more sectors tend to blur into one, particularly with the use of technology. Leading on to the third point about business transformation. There's so much pressure on us now to change as organizations if we're going to compete and survive. And then at the same time, we've had COVID, and what that's brought in terms of remote working and challenges in terms of engaging the workforce. The big topic of recent months in terms of the cost of living crisis that we are clearly, sadly, only at the start of. And then right the way through to then the challenges we've had in this country and indeed further abroad in terms of healthcare provision. But ultimately, all of this means there's just too many things that are influencing at the moment the decisions we should be making about an effective benefits and wellbeing program. So this was the backdrop to which we had the hypothesis. We agreed with Reba, let's dig into this deeper, let's see what you have to say about this. And the idea was that if there's this much change happening to businesses and the individuals you employ, then surely our benefits programs are going to start lagging behind those demands very quickly if we're not careful. So that was the hypothesis. Let's see if it was proven out. First and foremost, we asked you all, how far behind various key pillars such as your business strategy, your culture, your HR and people objectives, do you feel your benefits and wellbeing program is today? And needless to say, as you can see there weren't many people saying that they've done a fantastically good job of keeping pace with all of the change that's happening in their organization. It's no surprise why. Firstly, it's no surprise that it lags, right? No one's going to say that we're going to redesign our benefits program before we think about where our business is heading. So it's natural there should be a lag. The frightening thing for us was how big the gulf is between understanding of business priorities, people pressures, and your corporate culture, and where the benefits programs are currently at. And for us, that's a significant gap that we have to close. Because particularly for those of you that make a significant investment into your programs, if they aren't representative and supportive of your EVP, your culture, then ultimately they're not going to deliver the results that you want. The best way I often talk to clients about this and have a think about it yourself is many people will claim it's very, very difficult to ultimately understand the relationship between the raison d'etre of any organization, which is to grow, and the investment we make in our benefit programs. But think about it, right? We all want to achieve growth. We need the business plans to execute that. They're only executed by having the right people. The right people are only here because they're rewarded well. And typically, between about 8 and 20% of that payroll spend will be on your benefits strategy. So fundamentally, you've got to believe, at least I think, and I'm quite an idealistic person, that 20% investment down at the bottom there should and can have a material impact all the way back up the chain as to how you perform as an organization. And it's with that in mind I'm saying you need to look back to your business agendas and back to your people agendas to assess how big that gap is. We ask people why that gap is so big. So if you humor me and agree there is currently quite a big gap between where the business and people agendas are going and benefits, we ask them why. First and foremost came attraction and retention. I mean, that's the most trite thing I could say, right? You all already know that. That would come top of the list any year in any piece of research. But the big thing for us, we believe, and again, I'll show you in a second, is our definition of talent has changed. Benefits have traditionally been very hierarchical, either driven by the sector that you work in or potentially the role that you have. I think with the competitive pressures and talent shortages that you're all seeing, that definition of talent, what we're prepared to invest and spend on them is materially changing. And therefore, as a result, that is driving a rethinking of our benefit programs. Similarly, and we've done research like this before, and never has changing social values come this high on the agenda. In previous years, it'd been about 30% of respondents saying it's an influence on our benefit program design. Now it's almost top of the list, right? As DEI strategy, ESG strategy, and company culture all come right to the fore in our decision-making around benefits. There's one really important thing I'd say about that, though, and I don't know if any of you would agree or disagree with me on this, but as you'll see in the research as we come onto it, a lot of people are saying we're going to invest in benefits that support DEI strategy. We're going to invest in benefits that support ESG strategy. My personal view is that isn't an investment of money typically, it's an investment of time and thinking. It's a, let's look at our program through that lens and understand the tweaks and changes we need to make. Whereas by comparison, when it comes to recruitment and retention, it is very much about reward and the spend that you're making. Big point being, not all of these responses should be treated equally. Some of them about the money that you'll invest in your programs, some of them about the time and thinking you'll invest in your programs. And I'll come on to that, should I, with nearly halfway through, and probably on slide 2, the time I've got remaining, try and show you that. Final one, which I'm going to skip through a little bit, but also very high on the agenda, was all about the response to new ways of working. It's been a big topic in some of the roundtable sessions we've held upstairs today. But again, this isn't going to be a fundamental redesign of the benefits, more how we execute them. So again, these principles that we're building up as to what is changing and why, they're not all leading to the same thing. Some are around investment in the package, some are around looking at it through particular lenses to make sure it hits each part of our organization and our values, and some of it is about how we execute to our people. But it's very, very clear these start to become the building blocks by which you need to assess the gaps in your own programs. So we then said, okay, we know there's a big gap, we know what the drivers are to change and close that gap, where do we go to next? Well, the biggest response that came out of it in terms of action that you're likely to take, those of you who participate in the research, is to increase your spend in benefits and well-being. This is fascinating because having joined this industry about 20 years ago, I was part of a wave back then, which was basically restructuring and taking cost out of benefits and then giving people things back like flexible benefits to still keep them engaged and interested. I think generally we've done a very good job of minimizing our spend in benefits, or let's be nice and say we've made it sustainable. Actually, what we're seeing now is we need to reinvest. And I think we're going to see a big wave of employers actually looking as to where the gaps are in the program and how they need to fill them. And here's the evidence as to why. We asked them, okay, if you're going to reinvest or if you're going to find more money, how are you going to be spending it? Nearly 9 out of 10 of you said, we're going to look at access to benefits across all grades. To my point of benefits have traditionally been very hierarchical by role and by sector, but our definition of talent is changing. So as a result, we believe that one of the first major actions employers will take, and think about this in your own program today, if you have a tiered or a multi-tiered benefits package, we think you're going to start filling those gaps. The question of should everyone have appropriate access to healthcare? Should our pension be inclusively designed so that some of our lowest paid staff can afford to be members of the scheme rather than opt out? This is the first big gap that we think is going to be closed. And the reason why is when we dug down into the sector detail, we found some very interesting statistics. So this question was about when are you likely to invest, in either the next year ahead or the next 2 years ahead. As you'd expect, technology sector, I personally believe that they lead the way in terms of benefit and wellbeing program design today. They're still spending more money on these things. But what's fascinating was the sectors that we didn't expect, like engineering, construction, manufacturing, production, and retail, were the three other biggest groups that said they're going to be reinvesting into their benefit programs. And why? Not because they're great programs today and they're rich, but because they have gaps in them. So again, this idea of removing the hierarchy, filling out the gaps, is going to be one of the biggest things that we see. And it's reflective of this idea that our definition of talent has changed. The next big thing we asked then, let's go another level of detail down, is where and in which parts of the program are you then going to be spending that money. Very interesting and not surprising that well-being is hitting the top of the agenda there. Again, quite a trite statement, we all know that's happening. But this was a really interesting point, because people have then said, spending money on benefit support DEI strategy, spending money on benefits support environmental and sustainability initiatives. But this, back to my point, those are just a lens through which to judge the performance of your program. They're not necessarily things to buy or invest in or do. Now, they will result in certain change, and we'll talk about that in the healthcare space in a second. But in reality, I think it is this first pillar that's the most important one to focus on. It's at a time when, if we go down the other end, insurances are relatively stable. A few of us still think there's money to be taken out of those programs, but a time when that's a relatively stable place to be, so by comparison, that investment into well-being is going to increase. You already know that already, but what's interesting about that is the fundamental nature of the investment is changing. Benefits used to be very tangible things, right? There used to be pension plans and healthcare plans. You used to be able to point to it and go, there's one, I can see it. This idea of well-being, when we went down a level of detail again, which I definitely won't have time for today, but that's the beauty of the research, take one away. It talked about that it's into so many intangible things, manager training, cultural initiatives, and things that actually support the employee day-to-day outside of a product or a service. And that's why I think the investment into that area is just as high as it's seemingly going to be. So, increased investment across the board. Three biggest areas of investment are well-being, DEI, and ESG. But again, those aren't going to be necessarily tangible things. They're going to be the way of reframing the success of your benefit program and whether or not it is inclusive and meeting the needs of more people. It is sustainable and delivering on your corporate goals. And ultimately, it's driving the ultimate outcome that I think you need today from your programs, which is positively impacting the well-being of your people. Again, to make clear what I mean by that, go back 20 years, go back to when the financial services sector led reward and benefits design as opposed to maybe the tech sector. It was about reward. I'm going to pay you more than the next person. The outcome we're trying to drive with benefits programs nowadays isn't about reward anymore, or at least not just about reward. It's about positively impacting the well-being outcome for the individual, be that financial, physical, mental, social, or otherwise. So change the lens or perspective through which you're making these decisions. And then finally, because I'm conscious of time, 60% of employers said they also intend to invest in new technology. That was very closely correlated to this way of saying, look, we've got to adapt to hybrid and remote working. That's due to continue. So again, this is all about execution and how we reach people and how we make that program more accessible to them. So some big areas of investment, it's clear to see. We also asked people then, how will that manifest into design changes? I've already talked about this a little bit, and I'm very mindful of time. So what are businesses planning to do? Significant increase in spend for DEI strategy, significant increase in investment for well-being. You'll see many people out there today, great suppliers, great businesses, who talk about mental health support and menopause support. I don't think it's in those individual products that you want to be thinking about things. I think it's something far bigger than that. We're stopping using the insurer's definition of what an eligible claim is, right? We're no longer saying, and they're a great business, but we're no longer saying my healthcare coverage for my person is defined by a Bupa insurance contract. Our perspective now is we want the whole person to come to work, want to support all of their needs, irrespective of how diverse they are, and as a result, we're starting to see things like chronic condition cover. By definition, a chronic condition is going to happen and continue. So why would you insure something that's guaranteed to happen? The Bupas of this world don't want to, right? But our philosophy now as employers is actually we want to protect and support the whole person. So it's not just about things like supporting the next, and apologies, I don't mean it's a fad, but the next, say, for example, female health fad. And none of them are fads, but you get my point. It's about looking at the whole person and understanding the gaps that are preventing them coming to work and at their best. Because most chronic condition care, by the way, is relatively cheap. By definition, it doesn't require major surgery every year, otherwise it wouldn't be a chronic condition. But we still didn't support it in the past. So our definition of what good benefits design looks like, and we're moving to a space where leading employers now are covering all health needs. So, super mindful of time. That might be a miracle. I'm almost on time here. So here's our big takeaways from this. Firstly, there's a new model for great benefits design. As you can see up there, the first outcome you're looking to achieve is the well-being of your people. So every single time you make a decision about which benefits, what funding, how we execute it, how we give people access to it, think around the 4 pillars of well-being. And then within that, as you can see from the concentric circles, always ask yourself 3 questions. What should we fund? What choice should we provide? And what initiatives should wrap around it to connect people with that need? What's really important is, if you were to map this out in terms of where your benefits sit today, in the social space, it's very unlikely you'll fund anything in that little red quarter circle there, right? By comparison to your pension down here, which might be 8, 10, 12% of salary. But in terms of when it comes to all the initiatives, volunteering days, charitable giving, and so on and so forth, work out where the gaps are, but that's the framework, we believe, to deliver people nowadays. So number 1, reframe your benefit program design in terms of well-being. Secondly, think about it through each of these lenses. What are your business goals? How are they materially changing? We had a great conversation earlier about transformation. If you're going into the tech sector, if you're starting to compete against Amazon, Google, Apple, or anyone else for staff, think about how you materially need to change what the business looks like and how that needs to be supported by effective people strategy. From there, look at your definition of talent. If your definition of talent historically was very hierarchical, well, most people are challenging themselves on that. One quick analogy, during the pandemic, we had an HGV haulage client of ours call up and say, we want to provide everyone with income protection for the first time. I mean, it's not a conversation you hear every day, but why? Because they had a real challenge getting drivers. And when they asked their drivers what do they want, they said their number 1 concern is their inability to work long-term because of the pandemic. So they said, that's the business case. Our definition of talent has changed. We can't get these people. They have a need. How do we fill it? Then, as I say, DI goals and ESG goals, they're less about the benefits and more about the lens through which you look at your overall design of your program. So it's not we're going to invest in this thing because there's an ESG benefit. It's what's our approach to sustainability? How is everything going digital? How are we making sure that from a pensions investment perspective, we're screening out businesses that we don't want to work with, let alone our people shouldn't be investing with, right? It's not about the end product. It's about the lens through which you look at things. And then finally, to one of the points I've talked about earlier, it's about execution. Actually, you'll see this irrespective of sector and industry nowadays. People have more success in actually delivering their benefits program effectively by investing in technology and the associated communications as much as they might do investing in certain benefits themselves. We saw that in sectors like technology and financial services sectors way back when with the introduction of Flex. But even if you're not going to deliver something like flexible benefits or significant choice to your people nowadays, we still need technology to get it out to them. And that technology should be framed in the context of those needs that I have and those pillars of well-being that I want to support. Interestingly, we did a survey with a client recently with their employees, with their staff. And the client was really disappointed to say, nobody mentioned flexible benefits in the survey feedback. Like, we think it's a great program. I said, yeah, because your employees don't think like that. They went, have I got a better retirement coming down the track? Do I feel me and my family are financially protected? Do I feel like I've got benefits there that support my well-being, my fitness, and my lifestyle? Right? They don't think in those terms. They think in terms of the needs you're supporting them with. Make sure you're redesigning your programs that way. So, some key takeaways, and by some miracle, I might get close to being on time. Number 1, understand where the business is at. Revisit your business and your people agendas. See how big your own gap is to saying, is our benefit strategy, our offering, reflective of where we're at as a business today? Number 2, work out, I say lenses or principles, right? Work out the lens through which you want to look at your program. You'll still have a bucket called health, physical, mental, or otherwise, but then say, okay, from a DI perspective, is it achieving what we want to? Is it inclusive? Is it actually preventing female employees who might be generally lower paid from accessing the healthcare plan? Do we need to redesign it to make sure more people are encouraged to join, for example? It's about looking at it through the right lenses. Then analyze, work out where your funding gaps are and the business case to fill them. Just because I say they're the right things, they're probably not. Go ask your people what they really want and need. Work out that list of 10 gaps you think you have and find out which 3 they really want you to address. Then, well-being. Take the opportunity to revisit your approach entirely. The raison d'etre of your benefits program nowadays, from your traditional pension right the way through to your Thrive or Calm or Mindfulness app, should be about the well-being of the individual. Put the emphasis onto that above reward, and I think you'll drive a better outcome. And finally, look at how technology can connect the entire workforce. It's not a benefits platform, it's not flexible benefits. It's what's my primary tool to connect people with those needs through the benefits that we offer today. I did run a little bit over, but for those of you who don't have the time or inclination to read it, that's the output of our research. Thank you.